Do you like aliens? Do you like cartoons? Do you like really neat wristwatches? Then Ben 10 is the cartoon for you. Spanning 227 canonical episodes, plus a movie. It's got its good episodes, and its great episodes, and its not as great episodes, but I might be biased. I consider it cinematic perfection. So, dear viewers, let me take you on a journey back through Ben 10. Again. Let's sploosh on into episode 1, and then there were 10. We open on a space battle that, could be considered epic by 2005 animation standards. Some robot-looking guys somewhat unnecessarily report to this discount Davy Jones-looking guy that the ship is being damaged. Surprise! Tentacleface, who is, Vilgax, by the way, says he will not be defeated and that the Omnitrix will be his. Wonder if we'll ever hear that again. Next we find ourselves in an elementary classroom where our hero, Ben, throws a paper airplane at his teacher. And then we cut to what may be my favorite TV theme song ever. It started when an alien device did what it did. It stuck itself upon his wrist with secrets that it hid. Yeah, you get the point. Seriously, name a better theme song. I'll wait. That's what I thought. After the song, we're back at Ben's school, and his teacher, played by the lovely and talented Jennifer Hale, says that there's still time to sign up for summer school. And Ben justifiably says, yeah, right. Finally, the bell rings, and Ben tries to dip immediately, but he gets held up by his teacher. Outside, we see some bullies picking on a kid, and foreshadow report. But if you're hoping these bullies are a one and done, you're gonna be disappointed. Weirdly enough, the one demanding cash is named Cash, and he has a cash register on his shirt, so I guess that's an orgy of evidence that this kid wants money? Ben comes out to defend the kid being bullied, and is just given so much grief about playing the hero until he bravely charges at the bullies. Immediately, cut to Ben and the kid being bullied, hanging from a tree by their underwear. They lost. Ben's grandpa Max pulls up in his rust bucket of an RV and tells Ben to hurry up and get in. The RV is covered in weird satellites and stuff. Not suspicious at all, Max. Not suspicious at all. Once in the RV, Ben starts spouting off about how excited he's been for this trip until he notices his cousin Gwen. They have a small exchange, calling each other dweebs and stuff, and, just generally showing contempt for one another, but Ben definitely seems more bothered by it than Gwen does. God, I can't wait till 5 years from now when they're actually friends and Ben is actually a nice dude and Gwen is a being of pure energy. If she would only just ditch her admittedly attractive meat suit, she could just go for it. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's backtrack. Gwen shows the proper amount of contempt for camping, and Ben has a brief moment of hope and denial where he thinks maybe Gwen won't stay the whole summer, but his hopes are dashed, and yes, she's staying. As they pull away, we can see the license plate of the Rust Bucket, which is S81Z1M. And, at first I thought maybe that was like an Invader Zim reference, possibly, but no, I checked into it, and it turns out they're doing the very simple code of number corresponds to letter in the alphabet. And, it says Shazam, which turns out is the original inspiration for this show, which, I didn't know that, but duh. Shazam! Ben and Gwen bicker some more, and then we transition into the next scene. Now we've got the first of many, many examples of Grandpa Max cooking something just really weird and calling it a delicacy. Wonder if that's a hint at anything. He makes marinated mealworms, and Ben and Gwen are rightly disgusted. Grandpa Max offers them a few other very disgusting sounding options, and they quietly confer about what snacks they packed in their backpacks and hoping they can last them the whole summer. Meanwhile, back in space, Vilgax's ship and the ship he's battling both deal each other devastating blows, and the ship that Vilgax is chasing sends out a pod that hurtles straight for the Earth. Back at the camp, Grandpa Max sees the kids, sucked all into their screens, not paying attention to each other or nature. So he tries to initiate some scary stories, but that only causes further bickering and insults between the cousins. He then tries the last-ditch effort of a High School Musical quote, "We're all in this together." Needless to say, it doesn't work, and Ben randomly decides to go for a walk. Ben walks along, grumbling to himself, when suddenly he sees a meteor in the sky. He calls it a shooting star, but it's clearly a meteor, and actually it's not. It's really a pod, but it suddenly changes direction and heads right for him, and putting our protagonist in imminent danger of being crushed. Hopefully he's not. Hopefully. After narrowly escaping death, Ben stands up to look in the trench, and he sees the pod. He's now convinced it's a satellite? Oh, dear sweet Ben. The edge of the trench suddenly gives away, and Ben finds himself right in front of the pod. It whooshes open, and he sees what appears to be a fancy wristwatch with a green hourglass logo on it. And if we remember the sweet, sweet theme song from a few minutes ago, you could probably guess what happens next. Ben gets this fug-smucking grin on his face and touches the watch. And yeah, it sticks itself upon his wrist with secrets that it hid. Ben then does the hokey pokey to try and get it off, to no avail, and runs away screaming for his grandpa. Back at the camp, Grandpa worries for Ben while Gwen admits that she'd love for him to be brutally murdered by animals. Somewhere in the woods, Ben tries in vain to rip the Omnitrix off with a stick, and when that fails, he does what any kid would do and just starts randomly pressing buttons. As you do. After successfully getting the core to pop up out of the watch, he does what may be the most gentle press that we'll see in all 230 episodes. He kind of gives it a little boop instead of the regular wham! Anyway, we get a reusable Sailor Moon-esque transformation sequence, and he turns into rocks and bursts into flames. This gives us our very first appearance of Heat Blast, one of my favorites, for sure. I mean, he shoots fire, who wouldn't love that? And, yeah, his name's Heat Blast, but I don't think they say that in this episode, so whatever. Our hero, Ben, panics for a few seconds until he realizes the fire isn't hurting him, and then he decides to enjoy himself by setting the forest on fire. Oh, sweet Ben. Is it alien force yet? Once Ben realizes that the fire has gone out of his control, he freaks out and contemplates all the trouble that he's gonna get into. Back at the camp, Gwen and Grandpa Max sit around the fire, hanging out, camping, until they notice the smoke coming from the woods, and like anyone who has met Ben, they immediately assume it's his fault. And they're right. Grandpa Max apparently has 2 fire extinguishers just ready to go. Okay. And then he hands one to Gwen and they run towards the flames. It's a forest fire. They have fire extinguishers. Ben, trying and failing to be cool, stomps on flames with feet made of flames, and Gwen and Max keep running wildly through the forest. Gwen runs face first into Heat Blast and screams at the top of her lungs. Ben tries to calm her down, but is immediately owned with a critical hit from a fire extinguisher. Not like with the gas, just, clunked in the head with a metal tube, and then sprayed with the gas. Heat Blast, or Ben, calls Gwen a freak, and then that is what makes her realize that it is, in fact, Ben. She is justifiably confused. Grandpa comes in hot, looking for Gwen, and she fills him in on who Heat Blast really is. He also seems a little confused, but noticeably less so. Once all that's settled, Grandpa Max points out that they should probably take care of the forest fire, and he suggests starting another fire and having them run into each other. I've heard of fight fire with fire, but I'm not sure this should work. Ben, clearly not in a lesson learning mood, is stoked to shoot more flames, and runs off into the woods in a random direction and starts another massive fire. It must work, though, because next thing we see is a forest ranger pulling up to a very charred, but clearly not on fire anymore forest, and, yeah, I guess it worked. Up in the space, we see that the smaller ship has been completely destroyed, while Vilgax's looks pretty beat up as well. And Vilgax himself isn't looking so hot either. He's missing limbs and stuff, and then he gets the bad news that they did not find the Omnitrix in the wreckage of the ship. He assumes it must be down on the planet, and he sends a really mean-looking robot guy to go retrieve it. Ben explains how the watch stuck itself upon his wrist, and Grandpa Max explains to him that he is not in fact a monster, but an alien. He acts like he's not positive that it's an alien, but he's positive that it's an alien. Ben wonders aloud if he'll ever go back to normal, and then he's granted his request by the Deus Ex Omnitrix in a flash of red light. He tries to rip it off again, and Grandpa tells him to stop messing with it. Grandpa Max then makes the super questionable decision of leaving two 10-year-olds and a magic alien watch alone in the middle of the woods while he goes to investigate the crash site. Oh, sweet Max. Vilgax's robot guy then lands with a big boom and sends off some drones to look for the watch. Ben, once again ignoring common sense and sound advice, is again fiddling with the watch. Gwen catches him and chastises him, but he's curious, so he continues his fiddling. Out in the woods, Grandpa Max finds the empty pod and has a discount Star Wars moment. He's got a bad feeling about this. Ben explains to Gwen that he does actually want to use these powers to help people, and she asks him what it's like to go alien. He gives a really vague description and then gets his wish by the watch activating again. He hits it down again, slightly less gentle, but still more gentle than usual, and he turns into another one of my personal favorites, Wildmutt, the Vulpamancer. Again, I don't think they say any of those in this episode, but that's what he is. He's got no eyes, but he can kind of see through his gills on his neck, or smell, see. He doesn't need eyes, he's fine. Gwen thinks he's blind and tries to sneak attack, but, he can see her, so he hops onto the RV, and she falls on her butt. Ben kicks sand at Gwen, and then runs off into the woods as she yells after him. Wildmutt's fun and carefree romp through the woods is interrupted by some of the drones. He tackles one of them and starts ripping it to shreds, but is interrupted by an untimely timeout by the Omnitrix. Gwen shows up in time to smash the drone with a shovel and save Ben's bacon. Back at the rust bucket, Grandpa Max gives Ben a stern but understanding lecture. I'm starting to see a pattern. Ben then explains how the watch works. Pressed, twist, choose, smack. They all come to the consensus that Ben could probably use some practice with the super powerful hero watch. And then, like a gift from the screenwriters, the radio exclaims that there are robots attacking people nearby. Ben insists that he has to go help these people because the robots are after the watch. So he Sailor Moons into yet another alien, Diamondhead, Tetramand, made of crystals, possibly Tatanite? Again, none of this is said. They get to the scene, and Ben starts beating up on the robots while Gwen and Max get all the people to safety. Ben is getting his butt kicked pretty thoroughly at first, but he's holding his own. Gwen runs into the ranger that we saw earlier, and he demands to know what's going on, but, a robot and an alien made of crystals are fighting over a wristwatch is kind of a mouthful, so she just says, "You wouldn't believe me anyways," and leaves it at that. Ben saves Gwen from getting crushed by a tree and manages to break one of the robot's hands before getting casually tossed aside like a rag doll. Ben finally shows some of that intelligence that we know he'll use to its full extent later on, and realizes that the crystals can reflect lasers and light, so he defeats the robot with its own blast. Ben manages to embarrass himself in front of the survivors and then takes off. Back up in the space, Vilgax throws a bit of a hissy fit. Grandpa and Gwen stand in front of the RV, packing up all their camping supplies, and wondering where Ben is when he rolls up as Accelerate. That's XLR8, but you say it as Accelerate. He shows off how quick Accelerate is by packing up all their camping gear, just like that. Gwen asks Ben what he was up to before, and he says, I just had to take care of something. And, we see that the bullies from the beginning of the episode are now the ones hung from the tree by their underwear. And roll credits. That was the first episode. It's a classic. We got to see 4 out of the 10 in this very first one. And I can't really complain about anything in this one. There's a few that I'm gonna have words about, but this is not one of them. This is a good one. So hope y'all enjoyed this. I'm gonna be covering all the episodes. You know, it'll be nearly 230 because that's how many there are, but I'm gonna do the movie as one instead of 3. So what is that? 228 episodes. Stick around. Press the things. I'll catch y'all later.